Who let that dirty man walk across the front lawn again? The words struck like a slap, loud, clear, and meant to humiliate. Clarence didn't flinch. He paused with the shears still in his gloved hands, the scent of trimmed lavender still fresh in the air. His back straightened slightly, not from pride, but from restraint, the kind you learned after decades of swallowing heat from people who assumed you were too simple to notice. The nursing home's new director, Harold Whitmore, stood on the front steps in his crisp khaki suit, his blue tie fluttering in the summer breeze like it was too good for the town it blew through. His voice had that sharp nasal edge, the kind of tone that turned words into weapons. And like most of his kind, he assumed his words carried authority just because they came from his mouth. "Clarence," he said, not walking down, just standing there with his arms crossed like he was Moses on Sinai. "You've got muddy boots again. I told you the residents don't want to look out their windows and see dirt." The residents. As if the old men and women sitting inside didn't look forward to the sight of Clarence tending the roses, waving as he worked, some even shuffling outside just to talk to him about tomatoes or ask when the sunflowers would bloom again. But none of that mattered to Whitmore. Clarence tilted his chin just a little and said nothing. The silence felt louder than 1,000 backtalks. That silence had raised children. That silence had buried friends. That silence had weathered white men with more power and less heart. Harold scoffed and turned back toward the building, waving his hand like he was shooing off a fly. "Clean it up, or find another job." Inside one of the home's wide-paneled windows, behind thick curtains, a woman leaned forward in her chair. Her eyes followed Harold, then shifted to Clarence. She made a note in the small leather notebook on her lap and didn't speak. Not yet. Senator Rebecca Langston was used to watching first. She had come unannounced, disguised as a simple state representative's assistant, part of a surprise oversight visit to a privately owned elderly care center under new management. No one had recognized her, not that they would. Most people in this part of town didn't expect a black woman to be anything more than the nurse, the cook, or in Clarence's case, the gardener. Clarence didn't know she was there either. Not yet. He went back to his work. With slow, practiced movements, he gathered the clipped stems into a neat pile and placed them in the wheelbarrow. His back ached, but he wouldn't stop, wouldn't give Harold the satisfaction. Meanwhile, Harold strutted through the front doors like he'd just won an award for being himself. Inside, he breezed past the nurses, mostly Filipino and Latino women who avoided his gaze. He didn't greet the residents, didn't acknowledge the soft moaning from room 112 or the coughs echoing down the hallway. He headed straight to his office, the only room in the building with a private Nespresso machine and a new leather chair. "Marcy," he snapped at the front desk assistant, "I want that gardener's time card checked. I don't think he clocked out during lunch yesterday. We're not paying people to nap under the trees." Marcy blinked, hesitating. She liked Clarence. Everybody did. He sang quietly when he worked. He helped push wheelchairs when no one else was around. He brought cut flowers inside every Friday, handing them to residents like they were his own family. But she nodded. She was 2 months behind on rent. In the main dining room, Senator Langston was walking beside 2 elderly residents, Pearl and Mr. Robbins, gently asking about meals, physical therapy, recreation. The more she listened, the tighter her grip on the notebook. Every comment was a thread in the fabric she was stitching, a report that would either save or expose this place. She kept hearing Clarence's name, not once in complaint, always in gratitude. Later that afternoon, Clarence pushed his wheelbarrow toward the back. Behind the staff lot, near the compost pile, he finally let the anger exhale from his lungs. His hands trembled not with fear, but frustration. He was too old for this. Too damn old. He had worked at Rose Hill Home for over 20 years. Watched it change owners 3 times. Saw good nurses come and go. Saw residents die with no family to hold their hands. Through it all, he had stayed. He had buried his wife 5 years ago and took this work not just to keep busy, but to be useful. Now, he wondered if it mattered. From the far end of the yard, he heard a soft voice. "Excuse me." Clarence turned. The woman standing there was dressed in a neat navy suit, hair pulled back, gold pin on her lapel. She looked familiar, but not from the staff. She had the air of someone who didn't need to announce who she was, someone used to being listened to. "Yes, ma'am," he said. She stepped closer. "I just wanted to thank you." Clarence blinked. "For what?" "For the garden. And for being the only person who spoke to my mother last year when she was here." His eyes widened just slightly. "Your mother?" "Margaret Langston. Room 207. She passed in the fall." Clarence paused. He remembered Margaret. Fierce eyes. Like jazz. Had asked him once, without shame, "You know Coltrane, baby?" "I remember her," he said softly. Senator Langston nodded. "She talked about you in her last phone call with me. Said, 'That man with the shears, he's keeping this place alive.'" Clarence didn't know what to say. He looked down at his gloves. "You're her daughter?" "Yes." He studied her face. And slowly, very slowly, it hit him. The senator. The face from the news. The speeches on TV. The one they said might run for governor someday. Clarence's mouth opened, but no sound came. She offered her hand. He shook it. Her grip was firm. "Steady." "Tomorrow," she said, her tone sharpening, "I'll be releasing an interim report on Rose Hill. About management, staffing, the treatment of both residents and employees." Clarence nodded once. She turned to leave, but paused. "If Mr. Whitmore says anything else to you, I'd like you to let me know." Clarence chuckled, not bitterly, but from deep in his chest. "I think he's about to have a very bad week, ma'am." She smiled. Inside, Harold was still in his office, feet up on the desk, scrolling through golf club newsletters. Unaware. Blissfully, arrogantly unaware. The storm was already here. That evening, the sun dipped low over Rose Hill, casting long golden shadows over the trimmed hedges Clarence had shaped just that morning. Inside the home, dinner was being served: mashed potatoes, string beans, and something the staff insisted was meatloaf. The hum of television sets echoed through open doors, punctuated by coughs, laughter, and the clinking of plastic trays. But in the administrator's office, Harold Whitmore sat in his leather chair, staring at an email that had frozen him mid-sip of espresso. Subject: Unannounced State Oversight Visit Senator Langston. Attached: a photo of Senator Rebecca Langston shaking hands with a nurse in the hallway, taken that very afternoon. Harold's jaw dropped. "No, no, no, no," he muttered, scrolling faster. How had he not known? No one told him a senator was coming. And she'd been here today? When he was barking at that damn gardener. He stood abruptly, knocking over his coffee cup. Dark liquid soaked into the monthly expense reports he hadn't bothered to review anyway. A senator. Here. He didn't even remember seeing her. Had he walked past her? Said anything rude? God, what if she saw him yelling at Clarence? He bolted out of his office, nearly running over Marcy at the front desk. "Where is she?" he barked. "Who?" Marcy blinked. "The senator. Rebecca Langston." Marcy's eyes widened. "She left. About 30 minutes ago." "Did she say anything?" Marcy hesitated. Just that her report would be thorough. Harold didn't like the sound of that word. Thorough meant digging. And digging meant finding things he'd tried hard to bury, like the understaffed shifts, the expired medications locked in the back closet, or the fact that he hired his college roommate as head of finance even though the man had no background in elder care. He stormed back into his office, dialing his lawyer before the door even closed. Across town, in a quiet hotel room overlooking the river, Senator Langston sat cross-legged on the couch, her laptop open, files scattered across the table. The incident with Clarence wasn't the only thing on her mind, but it had become the anchor of her entire report. She watched the footage again, the grainy security cam clip Marcy had quietly forwarded to her from the front desk system. There he was, Harold Whitmore, arms folded, yelling across the lawn. His tone unmistakable, his choice of words unacceptable. And there was Clarence, composed, calm, dignified. Rebecca leaned back, exhaling. She thought of her father. He would never have let a man like Harold break him. And Clarence hadn't either. She typed, "The most telling sign of systemic rot is not how an institution treats its residents, but how it treats those who labor for it." She paused, then added, "In Mr. Clarence Bell, Rose Hill has a man of integrity, humility, and silent strength. In its director, it has a man whose leadership is steeped in prejudice, intimidation, and the illusion of superiority." It would go into the record. And the media, oh, they would have a field day. Rebecca didn't like drama for its own sake. But she'd learned sometimes you needed the public's outrage to move systems stuck in silence. At Rose Hill, Clarence clocked out and walked toward the bus stop under a sky streaked with orange and violet. His knees ached. He missed his wife more tonight than usual. He wanted to tell her what happened about the senator, about her mother, about that moment behind the compost pile that had stunned him quiet. Instead, he sat on the bench and waited for the number 9. When it came, he nodded at the driver, a young man with earbuds, and took his usual seat near the back. The bus hissed and rolled into the dark. The next morning arrived like a thunderclap. Headlines blazed across local news stations and social media feeds. Senator Rebecca Langston exposes abuse at Rose Hill home. Director humiliates black employee while senator watches in silence. Hero Gardner praised for dignity under fire. Harold saw it first on Twitter. He hadn't even had coffee. His phone exploded with calls the owner of the nursing home franchise chain, the regional compliance officer, even a local TV station asking for a comment. He was still wiping sleep from his eyes when the board of directors summoned him for an emergency Zoom meeting. He tried to prepare a defense. She never introduced herself as a senator. She tricked me. That Gardner's exaggerating. But none of it held water, especially not after the board played the security footage. There was his voice, calling Clarence a dirty man, telling him to clean up or get out. Harold's excuses dried up in his throat. The board didn't need to deliberate long. He was fired before noon. Clarence didn't know about any of it when he arrived at work. He only realized something was different when half the staff clapped as he entered the garden gate. "What's going on?" he asked, squinting. Marcy jogged over from the side entrance, holding up her phone with an article on full display. His picture, the one from last year's staff newsletter, was on the front page of the Daily Herald. Above it, the headline, "A man of the earth and honor Clarence Bell's silent courage speaks louder than hate." He stared at it, speechless. "Clarence," Marcy said, voice breaking, "you're a hero." "I didn't do anything," he murmured. "You didn't have to. That's the point." She hugged him. Several nurses followed. Even Mr. Robbins was rolled out in his wheelchair to give Clarence a high five. It was overwhelming. He hadn't asked for this. But maybe it was time someone like him got noticed, not for shouting or fighting, but for standing still with grace. He returned to his garden, kneeling by the rose bushes, hands steady, eyes wet. That afternoon, a car pulled up at the front gate. Not a state sedan, not a campaign vehicle. Just a quiet silver SUV. Rebecca stepped out, dressed simply in jeans and a white blouse. No media, no staff. She found Clarence near the fence, trimming ivy. "You're hard to track down," she said, smiling. He straightened, nodding with a soft grin. Wasn't hiding, just don't own a phone that pings. They stood there a moment, the senator and the gardener, not as headlines, but as two people with roots far deeper than what the world saw. She handed him a small envelope. He opened it slowly. Inside, an invitation. State Senate recognition ceremony honoring community heroes. His name Clarence Bell written in bold. "I don't wear suits," he said quietly. "We'll get you one," Rebecca replied. He chuckled. "Will there be food?" "The good kind," she promised. They stood there in the sun. No cameras, no press, just the sound of wind in the trees Clarence had planted himself. And for the first time in a long time, he felt seen. Not for what he did, but for who he was. The ceremony was held on a Wednesday, not that Clarence cared about the day of the week. What mattered was how awkward he felt standing in front of a full-length mirror, adjusting a borrowed tie he couldn't quite figure out. "You look good, Mr. Bell," said Jerome, a nurse from Rosehill who had volunteered to drive him downtown. "Like, presidential." Clarence chuckled. "Don't know about all that. Just trying to look like I belong." "You do belong. They should be thanking you, not the other way around." He said nothing, but the compliment lingered. The state Senate chamber was filled with polished wood, soft lighting, and the low murmur of press and politicians. Clarence sat in the front row next to a group of other honorees, a firefighter who saved 3 children from a burning home, a teacher who launched a free literacy program, and a retired veteran who mentored youth on the South Side. He listened to their stories, humbled by the company he kept. Rebecca took the podium at precisely 11 a.m. As she stepped up, the room quieted. Her voice, steady and sharp, echoed with purpose. "Today we recognize not just deeds of heroism in the traditional sense, running into flames, lifting heavy burdens, breaking visible barriers. We also honor those whose courage is quiet, who stand day after day with humility, patience, and resilience in the face of systems that have ignored, belittled, or dismissed them." She turned slightly, eyes settling on Clarence. "Clarence Bell," she said, letting the name carry, "has worked at Rosehill Elder Care for over 2 decades. He is a gardener by title, but a guardian by nature. He tends not just to plants, but to people." The room listened rapt. And when faced with racism, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't fight back with fists or fury. He stood, dignified, unmoved, and that stillness shook the ground. A soft round of applause grew, then rose to a standing ovation. Clarence remained seated, eyes fixed on the floor, tears blurring the gold nameplate before him. When he finally stood to accept the plaque for service, dignity, and unshakable humanity, he simply said, "Thank you. I'm honored, but I just did what I was raised to do." And then he walked off stage slowly, humbly, just as he'd done every morning for 20 years through the garden gates. The weeks that followed brought change, some welcome, some unexpected. Rosehill was placed under temporary state supervision. A new interim director was appointed, Teresa Mendez, a Latina with a long track record of advocating for elder care reform. The staff felt the difference immediately. There were meetings, real ones, where their voices were heard. Staffing ratios improved. Nutrition plans were overhauled. Even a garden received a budget increase. Clarence was offered a promotion, horticultural director, complete with a raise and a formal office, which he politely declined. "I've already got an office," he said, pointing to the wooden bench beneath the birch tree he planted when his wife died. He did accept the raise and used part of it to fund a small scholarship program for young Black students interested in environmental science and agriculture. The first recipient, a quiet 17-year-old named Jalen, shadowed him in the garden every weekend, asking about root systems, compost, and when tomatoes grew best. Clarence took a liking to the boy. He reminded him of his younger self, hungry to learn, soft-spoken, and underestimated. One Sunday, Jalen asked him, "Mr. Bell, why didn't you curse out that man who disrespected you?" Clarence looked at him, thought a long moment, then said, "Because sometimes the loudest answer is silence, especially when you know the truth about who you are." Jalen nodded, writing it down in the little notebook he carried everywhere. Harold Whitmore, meanwhile, disappeared from public view. After his firing, the board released a formal apology, distancing themselves from his behavior. But screenshots of his comments, clips of the footage, and public backlash made it impossible for him to land another job in healthcare. His LinkedIn went inactive. No firm wanted to be associated with a man known for racial misconduct and managerial cruelty, not in a post-viral world. One night, Harold sent an email to the senator's public office. "I've lost everything. I never meant for things to go that far. I didn't realize who he was. I didn't realize who you were. I made a mistake." Rebecca read it once and deleted it. She didn't reply. This wasn't about her. It never had been. It was about the man he tried to humiliate and the countless others like him, dismissed and overlooked in every sector of society. She couldn't fix every broken system, but she could shine a light on the cracks. By mid-fall, the garden bloomed in unexpected ways. Clarence added a new corner for memory plants, flowers grown in honor of residents who had passed. Beside each was a small wooden marker with their name and favorite quote. Margaret Langston's marker read, "Keep your hands in the soil and your heart in the sky." Every Friday, Rebecca visited quietly. She sat on the bench. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just watched the breeze move through the trees. It was never about politics. It was about peace. One afternoon, as they watched the golden leaves fall, she turned to him and asked, "Do you regret never going into politics?" Clarence laughed. "Politics? No, ma'am. I raise things. I fix things with roots. Y'all fix things with votes." She smiled. "Both take patience." He nodded. "And both need good soil." A long silence followed. Birds chirped in the distance. Then Rebecca stood, brushing the leaves off her slacks. "We're organizing a community board to advise on elder care policy. I'd like you to chair it." He looked at her, stunned. "I don't do suits," he reminded. She raised an eyebrow. "You wore one once, and you nearly stole the show." He grinned. "All right then, I'll think about it." And so he did. And then he said yes. Not because he wanted attention, but because he understood now that dignity wasn't just something you held. It was something you passed down. And this world needed more of it, especially in places where people forgot that every job from the top floor to the garden bed deserves respect. Winter came slowly that year. The frost tiptoed onto the garden beds one morning in late November, gently curling the last marigolds, stiffening the leaves of Clarence's collards, and turning the soil hard beneath his boots. Most mornings, he arrived early before the staff, before the residents stirred. Just him, the cold air, and the rhythm of his breath as he worked in silence. But now, things were different. He wasn't just a gardener anymore. As chair of the Community Advisory Board for Elder Care Reform, Clarence now met monthly with policymakers, care staff, family advocates, and elder rights organizations. Most meetings took place in city buildings, cold, marble-floored places that echoed too much. He still didn't wear suits, but someone had given him a good gray cardigan, and he wore it over his button-up shirt with quiet pride. It was strange, speaking into a microphone, having people listen to his ideas like they matter because for so long they hadn't. "Not really. I'm not here to sound smart," he said at his first meeting. "I'm here to speak plain. There's no dignity in being old if the world forgets you. And there's no dignity in working hard if the people in charge treat you like dirt." The room had gone still. No applause, just silence. The kind that says, "He's right." From that moment, the room belonged to him. One proposal at a time, Clarence helped push through new policies, increased minimum wage for elder care staff, better mental health support for workers, mandatory cultural sensitivity training for directors, and a mentorship program connecting high schoolers to part-time internships in elder facilities. He didn't want to change the world, just the little patch of it that people kept ignoring. At Rose Hill, life shifted too. The residents noticed it first. The staff no longer looked drained or rushed. Teresa, the new director, visited the dining hall every morning, greeting people by name. Repairs that had been postponed for years were suddenly completed. The medicine carts ran on time. Even the food, though not gourmet, was hot and fresh. And every Friday, without fail, a vase of fresh flowers appeared in the main hallway, picked and arranged by Clarence and Jalen, the scholarship student. The two had become inseparable. They laughed, bickered over fertilizer, argued about jazz versus trap music, and built the memory garden into something that drew people from other homes to visit. Jalen even won a small city award for his essay, "What My Mentor Taught Me," without ever saying much. In it he wrote, "Mr. Bell doesn't lecture. He plants. And somehow, that's louder than shouting. He made me see that being underestimated is not an insult. It's a quiet invitation to surprise the world." Clarence didn't cry often, but that essay cracked him wide open. At the awards ceremony, he sat in the back, hidden under his old flat cap, beaming. Rebecca continued her visits, though less often now. She was busier. Rumors were swirling that she'd be announcing a run for governor. But every few weeks, she'd find time to come by the garden, especially when the camellias were in bloom. One afternoon in early spring, she found Clarence sitting on the bench with Jalen, teaching him how to graft fruit trees. She waited until the lesson ended, then sat beside him. "You've built something here," she said. He shrugged. "I just planted a few things." "No," she said softly. "You planted dignity, and that's harder than flowers." They sat quietly for a moment, sunlight streaming between the branches. "I'm going to announce soon," she added. "Big press, big promises, all of that." He smiled. "You'll win." She looked at him. "Only if I remember who I'm fighting for." "You already know," he replied. "You always did." She nodded. "Still, I'll need people around me who don't care about politics, just truth. You'd be surprised how rare that is." He chuckled. "You want me to be your advisor?" "Not officially. Just keep reminding me where I come from." "You come from Margaret Langston," he said, eyes misty. And she never forgot anything that mattered. Rebecca swallowed hard. Then she stood, squeezed his shoulder gently, and left. He watched her go, the weight of history and hope in every step. Months passed. In the fall, Rebecca Langston announced her campaign for governor of the state. Clarence watched it from his living room, the news flickering across his old TV. She stood at a podium surrounded by families, workers, elders, and students. Not politicians. In the front row, standing quietly, a head taller than most, was Jalen. Behind him, holding a camera and trying not to cry, was Clarence. When the news asked her who inspired her vision for reform, she smiled and said one name: Clarence Bell. It echoed across the state like a hymn. Years later, Clarence retired for good. He was well into his 70s, knees too stiff, eyesight dimming. But the garden remained. Jalen took over his post, not just as gardener, but as mentor, and he never made a decision about the grounds without whispering, "What would Mr. Bell say?" Every spring, a new generation of students passed through the garden, learning not just about plants, but about patience, silence, and standing tall even when the world tries to bend you. A brass plaque stood beneath the tallest tree: Clarence Bell Memorial Garden, in honor of the man who planted truth, dignity, and justice with every step. And beneath that, the quote he once gave to Jalen: "Sometimes the loudest answer is silence, especially when you know the truth about who you are." It became a mantra printed on school walls, quoted in speeches, taught in leadership courses. And for once, the name of the Black Gardener wasn't just remembered. It was revered. One final note: the day Clarence passed, quietly, in his sleep, the news made its way to the governor's mansion. Rebecca Langston canceled her meetings that day. She returned to Rose Hill alone, walked to the garden in the soft morning light, and sat on that old bench beneath the birch tree. In her hands, she held a single white rose. She placed it at the base of the plaque and whispered, "Thank you for keeping me grounded." Then she sat there in silence. Because for Clarence Bell, that was always enough. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.